Okay, first video. Start doing some videos here and put them on the internet, I guess. Kind of talk about what we're doing and what we're trying to build. There's no better way to communicate these days to lots of people about what we're doing, why we're doing it, and what kind of got us to this point. My name's Travis. I make wine in Oregon in the Willamette Valley. Our company is called De la Boue Wines, which is a French phrase that literally translates to from the mud, of the dirt. You know, it's one of those French phrases that they don't really have a direct translation. You know, they're French. That's how they do. But anyway, we really loved the idea of starting with soil. That's the, good soil is the first thing that you need on a long list of things to make wine that is incredible. So, kind of giving homage to the French because they've been doing it for a long time, and thinking about our decision-making process, the first thing that we need is incredible soil. So that's kind of where the name comes from. What led us here? I worked in food and beverage for many, many years. I don't know, all the way from college to about 2017. Could probably go really long into that, but I worked in food and beverage. Ended up working at a place in Montana called the Yellowstone Club, which is a private ski resort, which is absolutely as kind of ridiculous as it sounds. It's a private ski resort, so the skiing was incredible. For members, we got to ski there a little bit, but we also had passes around other places in the Big Sky area, Bozeman. But that's kind of where my interest was piqued in wine. I, took an interest in it. It was this wine list that was, hundreds of pages, unbelievable selection from things all over the world. I'd never been in the presence of anything like that. And I just kind of, like, on downtime would start reading the wine list and wonder why this thing was expensive. Why was this nice? What was the context behind this wine? It amazed me how many things there were in the world, how many wines. I thought, I'll never get to the end of this. So that's kind of where my interest was piqued, and I knew that I had an opportunity to learn a lot while I was in front of that. So started just kind of learning in that way, ended up becoming in charge of the wine program for a little while, and got to talk to the members about what they like, and many of them were incredibly kind and would ask if I had tried something before, and if I hadn't, they would offer me a little bit to try. They liked that I was interested in it and wanted to learn. And there's an educated clientele. People knew their wine there. It was really a fascinating place to learn about wine. I ended up getting an opportunity to come out to Oregon and work a harvest in order to kind of keep learning more. And I was kind of training like sommelier, studying to be a somm, and came out and worked a harvest because I wanted to keep learning more and continue my education, understand it from the production side. A good friend and colleague had worked out here, and she ended up connecting me to someone to get a job. So I came out and worked harvest and fell in love with the work. I fell in love with all of it. I thought, this is what I want to do. I had so much more fun for my own personal growth. I was good on the floor. I was good in the restaurant. But I loved getting to ask questions. I loved getting to be around the wine. I loved getting to be around the barrels. I loved getting to see it come in. I loved every bit of it. It felt like it was never going to get boring for me. And so I, mid-harvest 2014 had kind of decided, like, I want to move back here to Oregon. I want to make wine. I loved the wine from Oregon when I was working at the club. It was my favorite. The wines from Oregon were my favorite wines. I thought, man, these are incredible. It didn't feel like the rest of the world was aware of that yet. People knew Napa, the big names, Sonoma, all of California, really. Those folks had kind of a longer history and a little bit more, fanfare, I guess, if you will. But the wines from Oregon were beautiful. They weren't beating you over the head with flavor. They were nuanced. It was the first times that I ever started going, oh man, that's incredibly different. And I thought that's where I want to go. It also felt like we could still do it for not very much money. It felt like the American dream was alive. If we were to move somewhere in California, it would be incredibly expensive. So kind of ended up with the thought that we would move out here, figure it out ourselves, and land wasn't too expensive. We still don't have land, don't get me wrong, but when we look at what our dreams are, it's not unattainable here. It's going to take a lot of hard work. I think that's true of anywhere that you go, and not coming from a humongous amount of financial backing, we've had to figure out a lot of our own unique ways to get around some of the things, because a lot of it is really cost prohibitive. So that's something that I really pride ourselves on, in having done it this way and built it organically, and not over leveraged ourselves in a way that's kind of ridiculous, which is easy to do. I think you get the same old story from many different wineries. It's like, well, I made money doing this other thing, and I always wanted to just retire here on the winery, and none of it matters. I'm here to tell you that it does matter, and that would be a really easy way to do it. But it is a business, and it still has to kind of make sense for us. So it's been pretty fun to do it in a uniquely different way that isn't maybe the norm. So anyway, how did we do that? What are some of the unique ways that we were able to do it? Started making wine where I now used to work, my former employer. We started making wine there, and they let us do it for no money, so that was incredibly wonderful. I guess I should go back to moving out here to Oregon. So let's take a step back. Sorry, I'm not a professional here, and this is not a marketing video, so just gonna have to bear with me on these. And I'll probably get better as we go, but maybe not. Who knows? I'm pretty long-winded. So getting out of the restaurant industry, my wife had kind of looked at me and said, I knew that I needed a change. I was tired of working the nights. I was getting closer to probably marrying this lady. Her name is Tess, and not just some lady. So she said, what would you do if you could do anything? I had an offer to work for a distributor and sell wine in Montana, which would have kept me around wine and my interests. But it was one of those things that was like, it wasn't really that much money. And I thought to myself, if I'm going to be poor or broke, if I'm not going to make very much money, I might as well chase my dream. So I looked at my wife, then girlfriend, and said I would go make wine in Oregon. That's what I would do. So she said, let's go do it. And that's, a moment I was like, well, I'm definitely going to have to marry her now. So we, don't get me wrong, I already knew that, but it was pretty locked in. I wanted to make sure that if she was going to move somewhere with me, we were in it for the long haul. So we packed up and moved to Oregon March of 2017. Took a job working for a really large heavy production winery, and was able to learn a tremendous amount there. Ended up becoming the winemaker, and got to learn a lot about the fundamentals. While I was still working in the cellar, this is when the idea of this came up. I was making large production, large scale, huge volume wine, things that I just didn't find as interesting. Making a lot of volume, how much throughput can you get? I didn't feel like I was getting to make the wines that I fell in love with when I was selling wine, and that's kind of what spurred this. I was like, I want to make something that we care about. I want to make something that we can maybe even experiment a little bit, but like I want to make something that I want to make, selfishly, the artistic creative expression wanting to come out in a different way than let's see how much we can make. That's when things like that were really great for learning fundamentals and learning the science behind it, and there's no better way. I'm unbelievably thankful for the opportunities that I got in that fashion, but it wasn't the thing that we didn't own it wasn't ours. So my business partner Chris and I we go back about 15 years, and Chris was out here visiting at one point and said, what do we need to do to start something ourselves? Like, you moved here, sight unseen. What makes a person do that? And how can we work together on a project? And, I said, well, we just start out small, buy a couple tons of grapes and see if people like it. And if they do, they'll buy it, and maybe we can afford to do it again. And that's kind of has been our mindset the entire way. Was we'll make a little bit more as long as we keep selling all of it, then that means keep making more. So we've kind of done that. Now I think that we'll eventually get to a stage where we can't do that. As our business grows, there's always going to be constrictions, but we've just tried to do it really slowly and methodically and smartly, at least in the way that I think of being smart. Putting a lot of money back into the business, namely in the expense of more grapes. That's the main thing that we've continued to buy more grapes every year, because we keep doing at least a fairly decent job. So thank you to anybody out there that has bought our wine or has tried our wine. We've been able to grow this far over 5-6 years because of you. So thank you. So anyway, that's kind of how we got to let's start this company. So started looking for a site, and we ended up finding Vista Grande Vineyard, which is in the now Laurelwood district. It's a small vineyard up on the top of the Chehalem Mountains on the north facing side of that. So kind of an interesting site. It tilts north, actually. Also, a lot of times things, generally speaking, kind of fall off to the south. We fall off a little bit to the north and east, so we get really gentle sunlight in the morning. The things don't get too crazy ripe, or sugars don't spike, because we have almost no afternoon sun. And so the choice for that wine, that vineyard, is that I always wanted to make wines that went well with food. That's a big piece. I wanted to retain that acidity. I want it to be really bright and fresh. I want to make wines that leave a little bit of space for the food. I think when you oftentimes there's a kind of dogmatic approach where you're going to make a wine and you say, I want this wine, or the winemaker wants as much as possible in that wine. There are many different wines out there in the world that are full of flavor. I always loved the wines that were a little more European in style, a little lower alcohol, that didn't overwhelm the palate. Anyway, I'm getting down into some kind of technical nitty-gritty here, but maybe we save that for a later time. Anyway, the site had the characteristics to produce grapes that I thought would make the wine that we wanted to make. So that's how it started. We ended up purchasing a couple tons of grapes from there. We actually ended up only getting 1 ton. Anyway, that's kind of how it started. And then we made that, and the vintage was 2019. Basically enough money to buy fruit, some barrels, and bottles, labels, all that stuff. So that kind of brings us up to the first vintage and how we kind of got started with De La Boue. Again, we just kind of have pushed through, and the first year, we made that wine, we crushed the grapes in 2019. By the time we were selling that wine, the entire world had changed. So it was a pretty interesting time in our lives to be kind of starting a business, but that's kind of how that began. And it was really fascinating to see the world change in that way. All the while, this wine, the 2019 vintage, was just kind of sitting in a barrel. You know, when it went in there, the world was one way. When it came out, it was a completely different way. Everything had changed. It was wild. So, yeah, it's crazy to think about that. Anyway, that's kind of how we got started. We started that first vintage with 150 cases, maybe 200 cases between there, 150 to 200. And I was just working in the cellar at the time, so I was just a wee cellar rat, and you know, had a couple tons of grapes in the barrel. We also made some Syrah the first year as well. That's where the other kind of supplemental grape volume came from. So we made those two wines, and have been really happy. We were happy with how they came out, and the thought was, you know, if people like them, they'll buy them, and if they don't, we'll have wine to drink for the rest of our lives, and we just won't worry about it, and we'll, you know, be happy with that. So luckily, people liked it. And in fact, when we made wine in 2020, people liked our 2019 wine so much that they actually bought more, and that was a huge validation. Because mostly friends and family had bought it in our first year. People probably that felt sorry for us, and the responses were great, and it was just really, really incredible to see that kind of come back. I think I'd also add that you know, on top of wanting to make something that's really, really delicious, I loved how wine had the, you know, the possibility. It had the impact of sharing a bottle of wine with people that you love, highlighting a meal. You know, I always like to think that wine is the exclamation point on an amazing experience. You know, you had a great day. You know, from when I was working, you know, you look at people come in and they had the best day of their lives, that they were, you know, skiing with their loved ones, their family. They were together, and they marked time by sharing an incredible bottle of wine. And I loved that image. I loved the idea of making something that could be put on the table, that highlights someone's dinner or experience, or, you know, maybe it has that wonderful communal celebratory feel, and that is what I thought was really amazing. And wine kind of goes with other things. It's not like you know, maybe not always, but it's very rare to just sit down and drink wine, you know, a glass of wine by yourself. Maybe it's not that weird. I mean, I'd do it from time to time, don't get me wrong, but generally speaking, if you're alone, you know, if I'm alone, I'm gonna have a beer, I'm gonna have maybe a martini or maybe a cocktail or something like that. But when I'm with people, we're opening a bottle of wine, we're sharing that experience together. Maybe we talk about it, maybe we don't, but either way, if we're having wine, it's usually about togetherness, and that's really what kind of brought us to this point. So now it's 2025. We're making about 2,500 cases, and I'm gonna try and do more of these videos so that we can, you know, keep talking about all of this stuff, because I feel like the story is really much longer than, you know, however long this has taken. On my ride home from the winery today, so we'll keep doing it. I'll just pop on every once in a while and keep you up to date on what we're doing, what's coming up. I guess I should say that. Just put together all the Chardonnay for the 2023 Gregory Ranch. Doing all the blends for the single vineyards as well this week. And that's kind of what I've been up to in the winery. Today was a fun one. I found a leaky barrel, and so I had to also do a little triage and move some wine out of that barrel into another barrel. And this is the first time I've ever found a leak on the top of the barrel, which was pretty crazy. So who knows? But glad to get it taken care of, and now the wine is safe. So I'm just heading back home, or actually going to exercise. But I don't know how much people want to know about me in this, but wrapping up the day, and now just pulling up to my house. So we will check back in with you again sometime soon. Bye.